This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have an outstanding guest. His passion for football is off the charts. There's no salary cap on the planet that can contain his enthusiasm for the game of fantasy football. From player profiler, it's Anand Nanduri. Welcome to the show, my man.
Kevin, thanks so much for having me, man. Big fan of your content, and I've loved this show for a really long time. And obviously, with the guest list that you've had here, kind of the profiles that you've done, it's really exciting to be a part of this.
Well, you definitely fit right in. I'm excited. I love sharing resources and sharing, some of the personalities in the fantasy sports industry. And you have a phenomenal personality. You're a joy to be around, and I'm excited to get into this with you. So for listeners and viewers that are unfamiliar with your work, what's your current role at Player Profiler?
Yeah, I mean, we listed on the site as salary cap and contracts analyst, but most of what I do is kind of discussing the job with Matt on what a general manager's job actually is, because it's kind of mentioned hand in hand with a head coach. Their life cycles are strangely similar. It's very rare that a general manager gets to see three head coaches in their time, unless they have a proven track record. But their jobs are fundamentally different. Right? A head coach's job is to year by year maximize a roster, whereas a general manager's job is to set the franchise up to succeed. And a lot of the times, some of these owners of these franchises that we love and care about don't quite see the vision there and understand that they're putting their GM on a year-to-year leash when it really needs to be a 3 to 5 year window that you use to evaluate their decisions and how things have come together, if only because, you trade away an asset that you get really upset about early and, it ends up working out long-term. It's tough to see the fruits of that labor, especially when you're talking about draft picks that are 2 to 3 years away. It's tough to analyze that stuff in real time and understand what you're actually getting back when you get those trades or don't make that big free agent deal. So Matt Kelley, the Podfather, and I talk about that on Decision Point a lot. So that's kind of my main role at Player Profiler, is guesting on some shows, but mainly Decision Point is what I do.
Yeah, it's a fantastic podcast for sure. From a consumer perspective, from the outside looking in, what are your favorite aspects of Player Profiler, the tools, features, content that comes from that brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the advanced stats and data and metrics that we use are awesome. The rookie guide, which should be out, is, if it's not out already, it should be very shortly, is another awesome resource. I love our draft guide, when fantasy football rolls around, because I don't know if you've had the privilege of doing it yet, but it seems like everybody in the industry comes together, and we have some really cool videos that come out of that, and interesting profiles, and you get a little bit of kind of the industry's take on where everyone should be. And we have a lot of fun with all of those things. You've got the breakout finder and the injury finder. I just think, when you're talking about how we view football as, just as consumers, anybody that's into fantasy football is into data to some extent. And, the gold standard for sports stats and advanced stats for sure is baseball. And so I think every kind of step that we take as an industry that adds an advanced stat that gets us closer to baseball is a step in the right direction. So that's definitely my favorite part of it.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible website. What Matt's put together is truly remarkable, and something that so many people utilize, across the spectrum of sports. When it comes to whether you're just diving in for fantasy or for just NFL analysis, so much good content comes out of that company for sure. One thing that is very clear to me when I consume any content that comes from you is you got a passion for sports. Where did that love for sports begin for you?
So, I mean, it's funny. Mom and dad, obviously from India, came to Canada, came to the US. And from a young age, kind of, 2, 3 years old, I was gravitating towards basketball, actually, even before football. Loved watching Michael Jordan when I was a kid. And then that love grew into, watching Kobe. Kind of saw the same energy and spirit. Football wasn't really introduced to me until I was like 5 or 6, not at the level, that you would hope to be introduced to as a kid, looking back. So basketball was truly my first love. Still love the sport, still follow it somewhat, but not like I used to. There's just no way I can't dedicate that much time to both sides. So football it is. Grew up, a Lakers fan, love Michael, but Kobe was my guy. Baseball at the time, I kind of, had a neighbor that was a Yankees fan, and he was a little bit obnoxious. So I grew up a Red Sox fan out of spite. Um, fan because granddad lived in St. Louis, and being stuck in Columbus between Cleveland and Cincinnati, you kind of had to choose a team, and they were just the first team that I was exposed to, the first team that I saw in person, and so I followed them from St. Louis all the way to LA. And hockey, it's got to be the Blue Jackets. That's our team. That's one of the we have the Crew and the Blue Jackets in Columbus. That's what we got, and so those are the two big ones. And early memories for me. I remember going to get to see The Greatest Show on Turf. We thought it was going to be Trent Green at the time. I mean, 6-year-old me didn't know the difference, but we thought it was going to be Trent Green at the time. Ended up being Warner, so that was really cool. I got to see Mike way back when I was super young, because mom and dad weren't huge sports fans by any means, but they could see that I had a passion for it, and so whenever they got the opportunity to take me wherever, they went out of their way to tell me, hey, like, this Olympian's pretty cool, or this basketball guy sounds like he's pretty great. We should probably get you in there. So they weren't necessarily the biggest sports fans themselves, but they fueled my passion for it, which is
yeah, that's cool. That's really awesome. So as a sports fan, obviously there can be some heartache along the way. What was the most impactful loss you ever experienced as a sports fan?
Like, as being a diehard Buckeye, born and raised, it's in my blood. You would think that it's a Michigan game, and there are a couple recent ones that hurt, no question. But the game that sticks out to me, and I'm still mad about it, is 2015 Ohio State, Michigan State. It was played in a driving rainstorm. JT Barrett had more carries than Zeke. To this day, there are a million conspiracy theories about what happened and why, but that's the one that I can't get over. Because one of the things that I firmly believe, in a single elimination sport like college football can be, and like we know that the NFL is when you get to the playoff level, I think sometimes, and even maybe more often than not, the title that you win isn't necessarily the year that you're supposed to win. And I think that 2015 team was actually better than the 2014 team that won the title. But, that Michigan State loss kept us out of the playoff. And, obviously Michigan State got clobbered. I think it was by Bama. I think they got blanked. It was a really ugly game. But that's the one that sticks with me, that one. And then there was a 2013 championship game lost to Michigan State. Also, that one hurt. So those two stick out in my mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes it's that the order of when those championships happen is huge. Like, for me as a Seahawks fan, I mean, I would give anything to have that Broncos game be the last one that happened, as opposed to having to kind of deal with the Patriots, the goal line Marshawn Lynch deal, for the last decade, right? So I wish we had that 49 or 48-3 or whatever, or 43-8 victory, later on, because it would be a lot easier to sleep at night. Now I go to bed, thinking about Malcolm Butler, to this day. So
that's an all-time tough beat too.
Yeah,
as a Seahawks, I'm a Rams fan, division rivals, and even I at that moment was like, oh man, that one's tough.
Yeah, and even worse, I was in the corner of the end zone where it happened at the Super Bowl. So it was not good. But there's as a sports fan, there's great moments too. What was your favorite all-time moment as a sports fan?
Going back to Ohio State, obviously 2014, that team kind of making the run, beating Michigan, beating Wisconsin, beating, Alabama, and then Oregon. I think the 3-game run that Cardale and Zeke went on, when they beat 3 Heisman finalists in a row, is pretty crazy. But that one sticks out to me as the college one. And obviously the NFL one is the Rams Super Bowl, because one of the things that we talk about all the time is there's this concept among fans that you're quote unquote going all in on a season. And the Rams went all in on a season. And the thing that never gets discussed about that particular run is, it's going to live in Rams lore forever, as it should. Home Super Bowl, you won. Those were 2 4 seeds. They were not supposed to be there. The Rams were not supposed to play the Bengals. That was never supposed to happen. So, the concept that, okay, the Rams went all in and won the title is, proof of concept in your head. It screams like, oh, they did it. They validated the moves that they made. And sure, to an extent, that's true. But ultimately, you were the 4 seed, and ended up winning a title against another 4 seed, the likelihood of that is slim to none of replicating it. And that's why we caution people on kind of following the Rams blueprint to that said Super Bowl.
Yeah, special time. I'm sure, as a Rams fan since you were little, to see that happen. I mean, that's what it's all about. You want to see your teams, reach the pinnacle of glory, and I'm sure you enjoyed every second of that one. So for you growing up, what was your plan, like professionally as a career? What did you want to get into growing up?
I mean, I was the kid that played Madden all the time and played NCAA all the time and 2K, and tried to create the craziest roster available. Originally, I thought I was going to go into medicine. That was just not my, it was the default. Like, okay, I think I'd be pretty good at this because I loved science as a kid, and I loved math as a kid too. But it didn't push the buttons once I got to college. And so I shifted my focus to finance and econ, and found a love there, which, I thought would be a career forever. It was not. That world is a little abrasive to put it nicely. It's just not for everybody. And, I think one of the things that, I try to tell people is they find their way in whatever career they're trying to manage is it's all right to make a change. We live in a world where, we have microphones. This kind of content didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. We would be both tuned into ESPN watching whatever content they wanted to make for us and, whatever content they wanted to put out. And basically, we had no choice to curate our own content, but to consume whatever was out there. Now you have there isn't enough hours in the day to consume all the content you want, even from our friends in the industry. There's so much that comes out every week that it's almost hard to take it all in. So, just a note to anyone out there that's kind of considering a career change or, maybe wanting to do something full time is, just give it a shot. Give it a shot. See what happens. The worst thing that can happen is you fall back on experience that you already have.
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible. I just recently had a conversation with Matthew Betts from the Fantasy Footballers, and we talk about an example of, career path in physical therapy, and taking a complete U-turn and heading into content creation and working with the Fantasy Footballers full time. So crazy, I love that advice. It's great advice to chase your dreams. Obviously, do it, with some reason and some logic, right? But at the same time, at any point, you can change your career path, and that's a great example. And for you, you've found something that really moves you when it comes to content creation. What brought you to Chicago? Because you're in Chicago, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, I was in Columbus for, basically other than college, the first 28 years of my life. And, I was just looking for a different adventure. It was kind of on a whim move. I knew the two guys that I would be living with. They're really good friends of mine. And, I just wanted a different challenge. I kind of wanted to escape the bubble of everything that I knew and was comfortable with. And, a really prominent job opportunity at MGM kind of came up, and I loved my time there. I had a great time, learning about the ins and outs of the gambling industry, kind of seeing the life cycles of, what high-end clients look like, what they look for, establishing connections with people. And most of what I love to do truly, in this space is, people view us as content creators as a source of information, but it really should be a two-way street. If I'm talking to a New York Jets fan, for example, my assumption is that they know more about their team than I do. And so anytime I get the chance to sit down with someone that's, a diehard fan of a team, whether it's at the bar, sitting in an airport, whatever it is, whenever I get the chance to sit down with someone that's a diehard fan of their team, likewise, like they're trying to get any kind of information that they can out of me, I'm likewise trying to do the same because they know their team better than I do. It's impossible for me to keep up with 32 teams as diehards the way that diehards do. There's they know ins and outs of everything. And I think that part of it is important too, that we acknowledge that we're not experts at everything. We can't be experts at everything. We can't know everything that happens all the time. We're doing our best to keep track of what we can keep track of. And, every now and then we do need some assists and some help from some outside sources. And, it's great to have them. It's great to have a network of people that know what they're doing and that have well-sourced information. As you know, we're in the midst of draft season, which means that everybody's lying to everyone. So having some good sources that you can really trust and rely on is paramount this time of year, especially if you're going to put something out there that, might shake up some boots. We saw the Will Levis odds drop last year. And that was a big deal this time of year. So, it kept me interested in kind of how markets move and, obviously the math side of things, how dynamic those prices can be and, what a sports book looks for. Just getting to learn the inside of that side of the industry that we're in was really interesting, given that most of my experience was really in the fantasy space.
Yeah, that had to have been a valuable experience. I love taking the most you can from something like that, and it sounds like you definitely did. So where along the line did you discover fantasy sports and fantasy football?
So actually, it was not really on my radar in elementary, middle, high school. I was just purely a sports fan. And shout out to Josh Tinio. That's my he lived across the hall from me my freshman year of college. And we ended up being really close, ended up being roommates in college, one of my best friends to this day. But he was like, yo, we play Madden together all the time. You got to join this. So in our basement of our freshman dorm, we did a 2 quarterback, not super flex, 2 QB, IDP, no online info draft. And to this day, I'll never live this down. My first round pick was Tom Brady. He was pretty good. This is 2010 season, I believe.
Okay.
And my second pick, just because I couldn't think of anybody, you're hungover on a Sunday afternoon. It might have even been like late morning. I'm just trying to think of names at this point. And my second ever fantasy football pick was Chad Henne. Real story. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So basically had no ability to get rosters and names out there.
No, because I didn't
going
realize
off the top of your head.
Yeah, I didn't realize that we were doing this without laptops. And so they were like, yeah, dude, no, you had to prepare for this. And I'm like, oh. So I'm trying to pull names out of my head. And obviously, I'm in my head, I'm thinking Michigan quarterbacks. And that team did not do well, to the surprise of no one. But that team did not do very well.
That's awesome. So when you first started playing, early on, what was it that hooked you? What was it that you enjoyed most about the fantasy experience?
I think that the biggest thing for me, and obviously gambling has kind of taken on some of that at this point for some people, is it adds intrigue to every game where, you had to be a real sicko to watch every football game back in the day, which I definitely was. But it added intrigue to every game where if you have enough leagues, you have a little bit of exposure to everybody. In terms of teams, there may be certain players that you obviously don't invest in for whatever reason. But, when you have emotional investment in every single game that's being played in a weekend, you're going to follow stuff more closely. You're watching practice reports. It kind of makes the week go by faster, and it kind of changes how you view football and what your relationship with that hobby and watching on Sundays is really like. Because you learn little things like, hey, don't put a Thursday night player in your flex spot. You may need that later. The little things. If you have a Monday night guy, leave the flex spot open just in case. You never know. The little nuanced details that you learn along the way are, I think, what make it fun. And everybody has a different opinion. I don't think that you can go to any two people in the industry and view their draft boards as identical. And I think that's part of what makes it fun is you get to come back later and, whoever it is that you're in a group chat with, whether it's your league mates, whether it's, a fellow creator, a buddy of yours, whatever. When you get to come back to that and kind of talk about, who was right and who was wrong and what the process looked like, how did you arrive there? All of that stuff is a lot of fun. And it adds another dimension to when you go do it again the following year, because now you're worried about, okay, well, I gave this much information to that guy about my process and how I came to this. Is he going to use that against me next year if we do the good old home league draft?
Yeah, it's true. The tendencies of your league mates is actually important to pay attention to, right? It definitely gives you an advantage in league drafts or redraft leagues and obviously in dynasty as well. Get to know your opponents because that information can definitely can help you create a legacy with some success in your fantasy league. Do you have a fantasy league that you consider your primary home league?
So the primary home league kind of dissolved, I would say 3 to 4 years ago, as everybody split across the country and it was too hard to get together. So now I would say, my default home league, we have a group of people in Canton that stay at the same house every year for the expo. And so we do a best ball draft. And we started that last year. So I would say that's kind of the default home league at this point. It's tough to get all the way into it in terms of managing your own teams anymore. And anybody that's listening to this knows the struggle. When you've got 15, 20, 30 a year between dynasty redraft, crazy rule settings, you've got, campus to Canton, Devi, all these crazy league settings that we've got these days, which are all awesome. If you can, the best part about fantasy football is you can find a setting that you like. But I think that the toughest part about keeping the home league together is, at some point, you're going to get accused of knowing too much. You're going to get accused of, making moves before everybody else did. So we had a rule back in the day that, unless it was tweeted somewhere and I could verify that, it had been out there, I couldn't make, some like league changing move of, picking someone up off the waiver wire that I kind of knew was going to be done. But that part of it was always fun, to be seen as it's fun to be seen as an expert, even amongst your group of friends. Because as much fun as it is out in the internet, it's a lot more fun when it's people that you've known for 15, 20 years that are looking at you like, hey dude, what would you do here?
Yeah, it's always fun beating your friends, and that's where that home league experience is so special. And not everybody has that opportunity to have that that tight knit group that's local, for live drafts and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
and a guy, obviously in your case, you probably just have tons of industry leagues, which are wonderful as well, and definitely fuel competition.
Yeah, Kevin, there's one that sticks out. Actually, Josh, the guy that I mentioned before, who's my lived across the hall from me, and then my roommate for 2 years in college. His dad has been in a league since I think it's 1999 that I'm now in. This would be considered the home league. It is still on CBS Sports. It is still touchdown only. And it's a 2-keeper league, and they draft every year in August, and I'm still a part of that league. So if anybody has any TD only scoring options, I think I've been in that league for 5 years, and just every team has been god awful. Because my brain is so wired for like opportunity share and whatnot.
Yeah.
What does your target share look like? How does your ADOT affect, all the stuff that we worry about. But it's, scoring go burr in that league. And so it's definitely the most unique and aggravating of all of them because, if you don't have someone that's scoring, 15 touchdowns on the ground, tough look for your squad. And obviously, QBs or 6-point passing TDs. So really, really, really interesting scoring format. I've never quite figured it out. That's kind of the dream one day is to win that league. It's called Cornhuskers if I ever, reference it anywhere else. But that's, I think, if there is a home league, I would say that's still it. But every year it's a whole lot of fun to get together. There's an offline draft that we do with all those guys. No time clock, take your time as long as you need to pick. And so that's always one of my favorite days of the year is that draft day.
I love it. That's the league where you need like LeGarrette Blount to bring home the MVP, right?
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. So over the years in all the leagues you've played, have you played in some leagues that have just had fun traditions, like maybe last place punishments or creative ways to choose draft order? Anything fun you can remember when it comes to just leagues you've played in the past?
Yeah, we had one that was really funny. Was we had one in college where the person that finished last had to drink whatever the winner chose for 24 straight hours. And for every drink they finished, it was basically the Waffle House thing.
Yeah.
But we had a bar in Oxford called Brick Street. And so basically from open at noon until when you get kicked out at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, you could stay there as long as you want. But the deal was you have to be barefoot the entire time. And for every drink that you get down, you get to lose an hour. So it was, I mean, they were coming up with some really, really heinous stuff. It kind of looked like, as a little kid, you take your soda cup and you go to the fountain and you push it through all the different soda options.
Yeah.
They did my man real dirty, but that was a spectacle to watch. So that was a really fun day in college. I haven't quite seen that one done yet, but that was a fun one.
Barefoot at the bar. Barefoot
Yeah.
at the bar. That's the punishment. I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So over the years and currently to this day, like what are your favorite settings and preferred formats in fantasy?
So, I mean, the PPR standard debate can go on forever. I'm perfectly fine splitting the difference and going with half or, tiered PPR if you so prefer. I think the toughest part about standard fantasy football is quarterbacks are not valued enough. So I think Superflex as a standard format makes a lot of sense. IDP is a lot of fun, but I think if you add Superflex, tiered PPR, IDP, all to the same thing, tight end premium, you kind of mix and match. So for me, I think the ideal is super flex tiered PPR, just leave it as is. If you want to add a little bit of a tight end premium, whether it's first down or, 1.1, 1.2 scoring, just to kind of even things out a little bit, I think that makes it a little more fair. But overall, I think super flex tiered PPR is probably the default fun league for me, just because I think that's the appropriate way to adequately value what they're doing on the field, as opposed to, single QB, PPR, where you have a running back with 10 catches and 30 yards getting 13 points.
Nice. Now, playing fantasy, is there a rival, like one person you can think of that when you beat them, it feels the best?
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
even in the industry or one of those personal leagues?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's Josh still. I mean, he's the one that dragged me into it, and, he's the one that's going to drag me out one day. But, we've played other sports too. We've done fantasy baseball before. We've done fantasy basketball. I think he's more into fantasy baseball at this point, but, football, he's the one every year
Nice.
where, it's you brought me into this world and I'm going to, if you're taking me out, I'm going kicking and screaming.
How about that Expo best ball league? Who do you want to beat? Who do you want to take down the most?
Linda won last year and she won't shut the hell up about it. So probably Linda.
That's a good answer. I love that. So when did you decide to dive into creating content? When did you get involved in the fantasy space on that front?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I had a personal Twitter account years and years ago. That was just for like the intermediate group in college and just like talking to people that, I knew. It really wasn't for outreach in any kind of way. And I can't remember if it was 2019 or 2020. I want to say it was 19. I created this account basically as a way to kind of tap in with all of the things that teams were doing around the league. Keeping a transaction log was easier that way. Kind of following national insiders as news broke was easier that way. And then at some point it kind of segmented and multiple people would ask like, hey, will you come do this podcast? Hey, will you do this or will you do that? And my first major one was it was also, funnily enough, Player Profiler. It was Josh Larkey with Code Breaker, I think March 2021. I don't remember if I was the first or third one. It was very early on in that show. And we kind of broke down all things salary cap, what you need to know, what you don't need to know, what's important, what's not important. Because in a lot of ways, like medicine or like law, finances in the NFL have been unnecessarily complicated. And you kind of need someone to walk you through, patching that back together. And so that's still to this day one of my favorite things that I've ever done. And then, 3 months later, opportunity arose. Josh reached out to me and he was like, hey, I think you and Matt should do something together. And Decision Point was born. I think the first show was July of 2021, something like that. And so, we're 3 months out from making it 3 years strong. And, I think we're 60 some episodes in and, people keep asking us to do that weekly. I don't know that we'll ever get there. We're trying to get together more often. Trust me. We hear you. It's just his schedule's crazy. My schedule's crazy. But, it's been a lot of fun to kind of put stuff out there and, to watch people kind of react to how I feel about certain things. And look, like I'm not going to be right all the time either. I think that's important to acknowledge as a creator and, kind of there are times where you need to take yourself seriously and, as some kind of authoritative figure on what you're trying to get out there. But I think a lot of us in the industry could benefit from taking ourselves a little less seriously sometimes and kind of acknowledging we're talking about a portion of a fantasy sport that's based on a real sport that, we're four derivatives deep on, actual what's going on out there. And so, it's time to take ourselves a little less seriously and embrace the fun in it again.
For sure. It's a fun game, and obviously there's a lot of fun to be had in fantasy leagues. And so from a content, creation perspective, bringing fun into it is very welcome on all fronts. Now you obviously have a big passion for the NFL salary cap. Is that simply just you have a love for football and a love for or in a background in finance? You just put that together. What inspired you to really dive into the salary cap?
I mean, it was, a finance job. I was, in finance for a while and I hated it, truthfully, and kind of explored other opportunities. I applied to the NBA, I applied to the NFL, I applied to a bunch of other stuff. And the NFL was the only one that came back to me. So I did that for about year and a half to 2 years and was really more on the validation side of things. We got to see um, almost the borderline like paralegal side of what finance people do. Um, but it was, an awesome experience to get to work there and to get to see, lack of a better term, how the sausage is made. And then from there, I took kind of an understanding of, well, this is what it is. These are how these transactions go A to B. And then I kind of took that knowledge and ran with it and, decided to study, why do teams make the decisions that they make? How have they screwed things up in the past? What can we change here? What does the league landscape look like going forward? And so trying to explain that to people and, even how contracts are stated, on television now are very different. Guaranteed money is talked about. Guaranteed money at signing is talked about. We're talking about void years openly now. It's discourse has come a long way in 3 or 4 years. So
Yeah.
super exciting to watch the average casual football fan, fantasy football fan, whatever, kind of understand the money behind the sport.
Yeah, it's an awesome niche to be involved in. I think that it's needed. It's something, it's content that definitely helps kind of round out, people's perspective on what's going on in the NFL, especially, if you're loving fantasy and especially in dynasty where you're concerned about long-term, um, you know, play for a player. Salary cap's huge. It's good. It's great content. All for sure. What's been the biggest challenge for you along the way creating content in this industry?
I think sometimes it's tough to accept that, people see you for an hour and a half to 2 hours on camera. And, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in every content creator's life that you can't quite grasp. We're all people. We're people first. We're someone's son, daughter, brother, sister, father, mother that's in all of this. And life gets in the way sometimes. It's often difficult to separate what's going on in real life from the fun that you get to have when you get to, collaborate with your friends on podcasts like this, or, when I get to talk to Matt. Um, and I think that, it creeps into your work from time to time. There's no way to avoid that. It's just part of who we are as people. It's inevitable. There are going to be days that I'm a little more excited than I am on others. And so accepting that, you've got to give yourself a bit of a break. Not everyone's going to be perfect. I promise you, if you get in front of a microphone 100 times, take 100 will be better than take one. Now, is take 100 going to be perfect? Probably not. It takes forever to get even close to what you think is perfect. And when you look back at it, a year or two later, after doing it again and again, you kind of look at yourself and you go, oh, wow, what I thought was really good 2 years ago is really not good relative to where I am now. And so to watch that kind of growth and progression and holding yourself kind of to a higher standard every time you take the baton from old you, so to speak. And it can be a lot to live up to, even in your own head sometimes. And so I think, as content creators, one of the toughest things that we face is, pressure to find something new, even if there isn't necessarily anything new that needs to be found.
It's a great answer. What's been the most rewarding part of your experience in fantasy?
I mean, I think it's the messages from people talking about how you help them win a league or how they understand more about something or how you made their life easier or they were able to explain to their buddies something that you said or, you know, You have people come up to you in airports. You have people come up to you, obviously, at the expo, because that's a much more, us-centric group of people. In the media workrooms, places, whether it's the NFL draft, whether it's, the Super Bowl, any of those things. I think, the most rewarding part about this is engaging with people. I don't think it's the content itself. I think it's how it makes people feel, what it makes people think, how it pushes the boundaries on what you think of yourself as a creator. And, putting yourself out there is tough. As anybody who's done this can tell you, the internet can be a crazy place, but, along with the crazies that are, the negatives, there are crazies that are positive. You've got lifelong friends that I've met from tweeting about football. What could ever be better than that?
It's pretty good. It's pretty wild what's happened with the fantasy community over the last few years. But talk to me about those experiences that you've had with media credentials at the draft and the combine and the Super Bowl. For me, I just absolutely love seeing your content and what you've been putting out with those events. You clearly appreciate the opportunities you've been given and are having a lot of fun with it, and your content specifically, like living vicariously through you, was a ton of fun, especially at the Super Bowl recently. What's that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's, luckily been fortunate, most of my life to have access to, whether it's through work or through something else, to have access to, sporting events, but not in this capacity, not in the way where, you're walking down the hall and, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are walking across from you. So it was pretty special. All of it was awesome. It was truly, it's a dream. It's anybody that works in this industry that, you kind of try to find your space. You try to find your place in this space one way or the other. It's really rewarding to know that, someone out there that's handing out credentials is not handing you a credential because you're a league employee anymore. They're not handing you one because you're affiliated with so and so. They're handing it to you because, your publication and, you've earned it. And I think that, Super Bowl specifically is a big one because not everyone's going to get that experience. And it was important to me. There was a tweet that I put out, from Radio Row as they were breaking it down. I think it was like 3:00 in the morning, the night before the Super Bowl or 2 nights before, as they're tearing everything down, thanking everybody for coming along on that journey, because it is truly a team effort, right? Without viewership and without people caring about what you put out there, you're never going to have that opportunity. And, without people, pushing what you do out there and telling other people about the work that you do and getting excited about the content that you create and how you go about things and amplifying your voice, you're stuck as a single voice in an industry, with unfortunately a lot of other single voices. And so, I think it was important for me to take people along on that trip and kind of give them the insight as like, hey, if you keep at this, you will get here too. I remember, when we did the draft 2 years ago, Player Profiler, we were in Vegas. And, it was just me, Matt, Alex Dunlap. I think Cody was there. Nate Liss was there. There were a few others. Like, it was a very small group of people. We didn't have credentials for anything. We were just there talking draft, for all 3 days. And, that evolved into 2023. We go to Kansas City. We have credentials for that. And, we're asking questions to Jackson Smith and Jigba and giving hugs to CJ Stroud and talking to Anthony Richardson about, how he sees his fit in the AFC South and all of these opportunities that, you think of as once in a lifetime things. And, so to get the opportunity, we got the messaging today that, we're going to be credentialed again. We'll see if it's red carpet or not. One can hope. But, to be able to have that access and to be able to talk to people, not even just the athletes, but to be able to talk to other people in the industry that you've looked up to for so long. And just tell them, hey, like, I appreciate you. You're a big part of the reason that I'm here now. And to get to kind of pass that baton on to the next generation of people that want to do what we do, is really special to me. And, I don't take any of that for granted. My 2 bits and pieces of advice for anybody that wants to get into this: there are 2 events every year on the league calendar that you should find your way to. That's the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. Jim Nagy is notoriously great with giving young reporters credentials and giving them a shot. And the other one is Indy for the NFL Combine. That is a week where everyone is talking to everybody. You'll run into GMs on the street. You'll run into executives. Find a way to Indy. It doesn't even need to be credentialed. Like, just find a way to Indy. Make your way to a bar. Make your way to a prominent restaurant. I promise you will hear things. Even if you just go to the Starbucks, you'll hear all kinds of things. That is where all of the news of the town spreads. So those two, I would say, are the two events that, if you're trying to get into this for the first time and really push yourself out there as a journalist, as a content creator, as whatever, those are the two events that I would really tell you, you can kick off your career, so to speak, by doing those things. And then, obviously Super Bowl will come, draft credentials will come. It's an exciting time to be a part of our sport because we have so many young people and so many, whether it's coaches getting into content creation or you have former GMs getting into content creation. You've got a lot of people in this space now that have not only the expertise, but the ability to talk, talk layman's terms, speak layman's terms to people that just want to understand more about the sport that they love. And I think, when you kind of contextualize it that way and you look at it, we are really lucky to get to do what we do. And so I try to never take that for granted.
Yeah, I know it's so fun seeing you do what you do, living that dream. But obviously you've carved out your path. There's a lot of people that do want to follow those footsteps. What advice do you have for content creators that want to just get involved and start creating content?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is find whatever your voice is. And, sometimes that's difficult for you to figure out on your own. I think sometimes that requires just creating the content, letting people tell you what you're best at. Because when you're young and, when you haven't done this before, I think you think what you're good at, but the people will tell you what you're good at. You'll get feedback enough to kind of isolate and identify what your voice is, what they like about how you do things, what they don't like about how you do things. And, a part of it is you are a persona to an extent. These people don't get to know you. They don't know intimate details of your life. You are kind of a character in their story. And, to an extent, podcast you as a character in your own story. I think the toughest part is, we're seeing, layoffs in our industry. We're seeing the industry change. We're seeing, gambling take a bigger space, bigger piece of the space than fantasy at times. You're watching, government regulation change. You're watching, really prominent brands like 33rd Team and several others, lay off huge sections of their workforce. Obviously, there was the article that came out about Draft Network and kind of how a lot of those folks were stiffed out of, a lot of things that they worked really hard for. I think the tough part for, so many of these younger content creators, and I don't mean young as an age, is just, newer to the space, is the jobs that we do now didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. And so the jobs that you're probably looking to do don't even exist yet. Your job is to create them. And so with whatever it is you're talking about, whether you're a YouTuber like Flemlo Raps, one of my guys, love that guy, talking about stories of, football players doing the behind the scenes stuff, or you're Brett Coleman that wants to break down film and talk to people in first person about what you see and how you see it. Or, you've got your TikTokers that are trying to create informative and encouraging content. You've got the guys on Twitter that are trying to create threads about, what fantasy players are most important and what stats and info you really should be paying attention to. I think all of these avenues give you an opportunity to kind of figure out what you're best at. And, you can take that and run with it. My advice to everybody is to try everything and let people tell you what you are and aren't good at. Over time, it's going to be apparent in viewership numbers. It's going to be apparent in responses. It's going to be apparent in kind of how your content is consumed. And, at some point you're going to have to give the people what they want one way or the other, because, that's how you make a living in this space. So, sometimes it's just easier to, from the jump, let them run with it instead of trying to, fit a square peg into a round hole.
That's outstanding advice. And there's so many people that are out there that have tons of talent and they need to create those opportunities. And I think that advice is tangible, actionable for so many people. And there's a lot of people that want to get involved in the industry, talented people. There's a lot of great people too. Let's talk a little bit about the fantasy football community as a whole. What's your experience been like going to like the expo and meeting these people that you've interacted with for years?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of crazy. So even pre-expo days, I think this was right after the first one. So the Rams win the Super Bowl. I come home. I am out in Old Town in Chicago in the and like the Rams Super Bowl pullover that I have, and someone comes up to me and goes, "Hey, like do I know who you are? Do you host a show with Matt Kelley called Decision Point?" And that was the first time in my life that I had realized that outside of our content creator community, like it exists. That was the first time that it was, borderline tangible for me. But as far as the expo goes, I mean, those are our people, man. Like, it's awesome to see what that event has grown into. In 2021, I want to say, um, you know, totally different experience than it was in 22 and 23. Uh, it's grown so much. I mean, to have the names that are showing up to this event now, and to have the A-listers, quote unquote, among our people show up to this event that was, year one was basically a bunch of people that were trying to make it um, in small town in Ohio, and now it's become this destination event that everybody in the industry, almost like FSGA, tries to make it to every year. To watch that has been truly incredible, and I think Bob and his team do an incredible job. If you're at the expo, you know about George's, you know what those nights look like, you know about Keith at the DoubleTree, you know, God bless him. And it's really truly one of the special bonding moments that we get a year, and it's one of those events that I hope to never miss again. Which is being in the industry, not being in the industry. Those are some of my favorite people, and if I list a name, then I have to list 3,000, and so I'm not going to go into that. But to the people of the Happy Hour House, obviously, shout out to them. We have a good squad over there that we rent out the same house. I think going on year 2 now. But we have so much fun with everything that we do. Every time that we get together, and we get together once a year, and it's the whole family, it feels like, right? We'll get to see each other there. It's everybody that are your quote unquote internet friends, getting to see them in real life, and getting to have a beer, getting to chat about whatever it was that they inspired you to do, or you know giving them advice on something that they're trying that you've done for a long time. All of those conversations are almost invaluable. There's just no way to put a value on what that weekend is and kind of what it's growing into. But strong recommendation, if you have any interest at all in creating content, or if you just love fantasy football, show up to the expo. It's an awesome time.
For sure. And you can't mention the expo without mentioning Jose's Landing too,
Oh,
right?
man.
Some karaoke to close things out, right?
That was our year one. So that was 2021. We've tried to find anywhere in town. This was like just truly organic. We tried to find anywhere in town that was open past when the DoubleTree would close, because we had a bunch of us that were staying at that place that were here through Sunday night. And that all happened organically. And I don't remember if we tweeted out something or whatever it was, but that that Sunday karaoke night became a thing. And then obviously the last 2 years it's grown and grown. And I think this year I'm pretty sure it's going to be even bigger than that. But Jose is a great time, man. Canton is just one-off experience. You can't really that's not one that you can describe in words. You just kind of got to go and live it.
You got to get there. Thanks to Bob Lung, an amazing event. So Canton, Ohio, every August, Fantasy Football Expo. It's the place to be. So if you haven't gone, definitely worth going. Everyone comes back, if that tells you anything.
Yeah.
And obviously, one thing that brings everybody together is their love for football. This is a fun time of year. You got the draft ahead of us. There are a few prospects out there that you just can't wait to find out where they land.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's quarterback is going to be Drake May. It feels like public opinion on him has wavered. Mine has not. I've had him as, not quite neck and neck with Caleb, just a little bit below where I have Caleb the entire time. If in any draft without a Caleb, I would be perfectly fine taking him 101. I think someone's going to get a hell of a quarterback. I don't think that one requires a whole lot of nuance. That's just my opinion. When it comes to wide receiver, I think there are a couple of really interesting ones. Ricky Pearsall from Florida is a good one. I'm a huge Jalen Polk from Washington guy. So I'm looking forward to seeing where those two go. plenty of really fun receivers in this draft. I mean, you're going to get into late day 2, early day 3, and there's still going to be some really fun ones. Tight end, obviously Bowers. We're trying to figure out. I know that it's cliche to take the guy that's at the top of the board, but I'm so fascinated to see what an NFL team's going to do with him, considering he isn't your traditional inline tight end.
Yeah.
That's a really fun one. And just like, where does he fit schematically for whatever team drafts him? So that's a really fun one. Running back, it hasn't really pushed my button yet. I mean, obviously as a Buckeye, I watched a lot of Blake Corum. There hasn't been a running back this year that I'm, over the moon about, that I'm, planting my flag on, so to speak. Maybe draft capital will change that. But as of right now, I kind of just have them where they are. Because I think, especially for running back, landing spot is so huge in terms of determining their range of outcomes. And so at this point, there are a couple that I'm excited about, but nobody that I'm going to, flag plant and kind of get way over my skis on and be like, that's my guy.
Yeah, sure. We'll see who lands in Dallas. They'll have an opportunity probably.
Yeah, that'll be a fun one.
Any deep sleepers that you're just really curious about, just like really deep sleepers?
I'm trying to think of who my super deep sleepers for this year would be. There's one that I love. It's a defensive back from Oregon. And I mean, obviously it's not a fantasy football guy, but he's a DB from Oregon. His name's Kyrie Jackson. He's 6'4", and I don't know that he's going to hold up at corner in the league, but man, I mean, you just don't see guys built like that play DB anymore. It's very throwback, like Brandon Browner from Seattle.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a Pete Carroll guy right there.
Yeah. I mean, you're a Seahawks fan. It's very, very Legion of Boom-esque.
He's going to land in Washington with Dan Quinn.
Yeah,
watch it.
Yeah, I mean, it's Brett and EJ did a great breakdown of that on Bootleg Football, but he's just a specimen. But he's my guy that I'm kind of interested to see where he goes. There are a few others. Obviously, we'll be live on the draft stream all 3 days, so there'll be a couple others that pique my interest. But in terms of offensive skill players, there are just so many in this draft that it's hard for me to go, oh yeah, I'm really excited about that. I mean, I think fun backup prospects like Michael Pratt from Tulane as a quarterback, I think is fun. And the same way that, Aiden O'Connell was for the Raiders last year. I can see Spencer Rattler turning into something, after the 101 talks 2 years ago were way too rich for my blood. But now that you're talking about late day 2, potentially draft capital, we're speaking the same language, and I can see some upside there. So they're not necessarily deep sleepers by any means, but I think, again, so much of the deep sleeper talk is landing spot dependent. There will be some deep sleepers that I'm super in on, but it's more so based on where they end up.
Yeah, we got to see where they end up. That is the bottom line at this time of year. But it's definitely fun, diving in and people want the content, so we got to talk about these players, right? I know Ray Garvin. He loved what Rattler did, especially like at the Senior Bowl. So there's a lot to happen. We're gonna learn a lot in the next month, and that just will fuel the next few months of content, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the draft is great content in a lot of ways because it's become so dramatized. With all the news cycles that come out about it. And you've got, people talking about how Malik Neighbors, is an aloof guy and, might be tough to contain in big cities and, just nonsense that comes out every year. Like CJ Stroud can't process. All right, guys, like,
he can process.
every year there's something that comes out about somebody where you're just like, God, who is putting out a hit piece on this player so that they fall 2 spots?
Exactly.
It's pretty easy to connect the dots there on who wants what. But it's just an interesting time of the year. And I think, a lot of people adopt the, believe everything you hear in March and nothing that you hear in April. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but it's more true than it is false. So, it's interesting to watch cycles change really, really quickly as soon as that calendar flips. So I'm excited. It should be a great time and, excited to be in Detroit.
That should be fun for sure. And what are you guys doing content-wise for the draft?
So we have, I will be I think it's me and 2 others. I'm not sure who's coming with me, but I will be at in the media room day one. Kind of if we get a chance to live interview somebody, we will. Hoping it'll be Marv, but we'll see. Um, and then obviously asking questions as we can to guys that go up to the podium, saying hey to everybody, wishing them the best of luck. Because again, these are kids realizing lifelong dreams, and that's what the event should be about. It shouldn't be about us bashing anybody on what they're doing decision wise, or we may not love every decision that's made, but ultimately you know the the context there should always be some kid is getting to live out their lifelong dream and is hopefully creating somewhat generational wealth for their family, especially day one. Um, and that should always be celebrated just because it's cool,
Yeah.
regardless of who it is, rival school, non-rival school. Um, I just think that moment is so awesome. And, to get to watch those guys, put the hat on for the first time, realize that they're moving themselves, their potential like wife, girlfriend, whatever, if they have a kid, or mom and dad, brother, whoever. They're moving everybody to a new city, embracing a new home, um, you know trying to build a culture somewhere or fit in as best as they can. I think that's the most exciting part about it. And so we'll have day 2 and 3. I will be at the desk with Matt and with Cody and with Alex Dunlap and Dio and whoever else decides to join. There's a whole a list of characters that show up to that draft stream. So excited. This will be year 3 for me. I think year 3 for us in total. But super excited to get to it, man. That's one of my favorite events of the year, especially, in fantasy football. There are a few holidays for us. The NFL draft is definitely foremost on that list.
Absolutely. That'll be totally fun to be part of, I'm sure. Let's dive into some rapid fire questions. I'll just throw out some questions. Let me know what first comes to mind. What do you enjoy most about what you're doing in the industry right now?
I think the fact that I get to talk to people in an open and direct manner. Our show is relatively unfiltered. So, what you see is what you get. It's an immediate reaction, whether it's on a stream, whether it's on a show. Not a lot of that is written out and thought out beforehand. It's just basically, Matt and I playing off of each other. And, sometimes it turns into a circus and sometimes it turns into a fireworks show. You never really know what you're going to get. But either way, it's a lot of fun.
Name one person that you'd like to watch a game with just to get their perspective on the game of football.
Peyton Manning.
Just good.
I don't think anyone's ever been better pre-snap. So Peyton Manning.
That'd be a fun one.
Yeah.
Scale from 0 to 10. How much fun is it to work with Matt Kelley, the Podfather?
Oh, it's a 10. I mean, you never know what you're going to get. You have no idea what Matt you're going to get each and every day, and that's what makes it so much fun. It's you're trying to play off of what almost is a cartoon character at times.
He's outstanding.
He is.
What are your favorite hobbies and activities outside of sports?
In terms of sporting events, so on and so forth, that consumes most of my life. Outside of that, I do really, really enjoy the world of finance. I find it interesting and fun and kind of keeping track of all of that. Also recently got into cigars, which is,
Nice.
an interesting side little hobby, but I love to stay up to date on kind of the world of finance and what's going on there. So it's kind of my, I guess, number 2 passion.
That's good. What's your favorite part of living in Chicago?
My favorite part about living in Chicago is the people. I mean, you go anywhere. You walk down the street in a Bears jersey, you walk down the street and whatever, someone's going to stop you and say, hey, Bear down. You'll sit down at the bar and someone will have an opinion on, Sid Luckman's season from God knows how long ago. And, you just learn so much about how much a city loves its sports. This is absolutely a sports town. And the people in it are awesome. Obviously they deserve better than what the Bears have given them product wise lately. But I think that's the most fun part is, everybody has a story and everybody has a sport that they love in this city.
And they got to be fired up with Caleb coming to town because there's a lot of unknown, like a lot of excitement, potential. So that's good. Finally, the Bears are going to get a quarterback they're excited about. Although, obviously some people were excited for Justin Fields, but this will be fun.
Yeah, no question.
What are your thoughts on deep dish pizza in Chicago?
I mean, it depends on where you go, right? Pequod's would be my recommendation for anyone that's out of town. It is not your traditional deep dish. It's more of like a deeper pan. which I think is the gateway in. But most Chicago people will tell you that tavern style thin is really what we eat here. I mean, most people aren't, eating deep dish as often as you would think. I think I get it like maybe twice a year when people come to town. It's not really that often. But the tavern thin here, strong recommend. Would recommend to
Okay.
anybody. Yeah.
Nice. How about an all-time favorite TV show you got?
Ooh, all-time favorite TV show. God, that's tough. How I Met Your Mother is way up there. So that's it.
Okay.
That's another. It's Psych. Who
Yeah.
am I kidding? It's Psych.
It's
And
like,
I love that James Roday is in SFB. I've been trying to get in his division for 2 or 3 years now. But yeah, all-time favorite TV show for sure.
nice. How about an all-time favorite movie?
Surprisingly, like guilty pleasure movie, National Treasure with Nick Cage.
It's a good movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like like I don't think it's the best movie ever made, but it's my go-to. Like, I'm sick and I don't want to pay attention to whatever. So yeah, that one's way up there.
That's a good movie. We have an 11-year-old daughter, and I think it was probably maybe like a year ago we watched that together, and it was so much fun. Like, I mean, obviously I've seen it a million times, but it was fun kind of having her see it, and she loved it. So that's a good one. How about an all-time favorite sports movie?
All-time favorite sports movie. Oh man, there's so many ways that you can go here. The one that immediately comes to mind is Coach Carter, because again, grew up loving basketball. Obviously, like Mike with Bow Wow was way up there as a kid. That was a fun movie. Space Jam. I don't know how well it holds up, truthfully, because I can't bring myself to watch it all the way through again.
Sure.
But basketball movies were always more for me than football movies were, especially when I was younger. So obviously, I'm going to gravitate towards those.
There you go. Do you have an all-time favorite artist or band or musician?
All-time favorite artist might be Lil Wayne.
Okay.
It might be Lil Wayne, but like a specific run in his career, like 06 to 09. Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get anything like that ever again.
That specific run. Good answer. What are you most grateful for at this time?
I'm grateful to be surrounded by good people. I think, you can thank, higher power for a whole lot of things. When you check in, right? When you listen to this, I hope that you understand that in some way you are blessed with an internet connection, with people who care about you, with, a network of fantasy football creators that, go out of their way to make their content as best as they can. We're all really lucky, in one way or the other. And, sometimes it takes things in life to kind of reframe that perspective for you and kind of get you to understand that, we are lucky to be where we are. And I don't just say that as a content creator. I just mean, living the life that we live, doing the things that we do, whether it's being able-bodied that someone wishes they could be, or whether it's, having access to certain things, whatever it is, you're blessed in some way. And so I think, the thing to be most grateful for is that you have something to be grateful for.
It's a beautiful answer. Now, can you name a few people that have had an impact on you, like a massive impact on you during your journey in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the defaults. You have your Matthew Berry, who's basically the godfather of this industry in general. But obviously Matt has a huge impact on, how I go about things, Larky and all of our people at Player Profiler. But just a few people from the Happy Hour House. Linda, obviously. You've got all the JWB guys, you've got Dynasty Coach A, you've got Toronto Dave. We've got, Timmy and so many people, shout out to everybody in there. But one thing that I will say is, before I was really like a content creator, before I kind of really branched out into like looking at what's out there and figuring out, how to curate my own content, the YouTube channel that I came across is Jake Hubman, the Fantasy Headliners.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that was for like a year or two. That was my leg up on my competition. So I met him at the Expo a year ago or 2 years ago. So shout out to Jake, man. He was the first guy that wasn't like a ESPN, Yahoo, or, NFL.com that I really got into. So shout out to Jake.
Good. Yeah, that's a great answer. I first met Jake in 2018 at the National Fantasy Football Convention in Texas.
Oh, wow.
And so I'd interacted with him before, before that, obviously, but got to meet him way back when. So it was fun to see him at the Expo. Great guy, and they're so dedicated to their craft. So that's an awesome shout out right there. Anything else we haven't covered before we close things out here?
No, I mean, I think we're all good here. I think it's just, just be careful about, through draft day, where you're getting your information from. As I said before, it's, everybody's trying to jockey for position. Everybody's talking to everybody about what they do and don't want. And you have no idea whether any of that information is good. I think, and, have fun, man. This is the time of the year where all 32 teams feel like they have hope. And so, even if your draft doesn't go exactly the way that you plan it to, just know, revisiting draft grades years later will give you a lot of perspective on how we see these things immediately versus how they pan out. The best time to give draft grades is 3 years later. But, if you draft, again, if you're giving out draft grades based on the information we had at the time, 3 years from now isn't information that we have yet. So just take it with a pinch of salt and enjoy it. Enjoy all the content that comes out of draft weekend. Enjoy getting to watch these people live their dream. Enjoy watching your content creator friends find actual football content because, man, it's been a while. And, just enjoy the spectacle that is, NFL Network, ESPN's coverage of draft weekend, because it's going to be a great time to be in Detroit. And also, just what a moment for that city. I think a lot of America sees Detroit as kind of this, hollowed shell of a city that it was. When times were tough, I think it was 06 or 07 that they hosted that Super Bowl. And then everybody in the football world kind of just abandoned them. It was Detroit, let Detroit be Detroit. Detroit is Detroit. I think, people are going to come to Detroit and be pleasantly surprised about how that city's rebuilt itself. Look, man, I'm not suggesting that it's Los Angeles, but there's some cool stuff to do in Detroit. So if you're headed out to the draft, have fun, stay safe, have a plan to get to and from wherever you're going, because obviously there are going to be chaotic crowds. There are people everywhere. Just be aware that there are going to be massive crowds all over the place. It's going to take a while to get wherever you're going. And just enjoy the hell out of it, man. It's you only get these drafts once. They go by really quickly, and then it's on to next year's and a whole new batch of prospects. And so I hope everybody that's going out there has fun. I hope everybody that is enjoying the coverage, whether it's ours, whether it's on NFL Network, whether it's any draft stream you're looking at, Twitter timelines, whatever it is, all the breaking news. Enjoy the chaos of the trades, which is always fun, especially on day one. But it's really, my message is really just simple, man. Enjoy it.
Enjoy the ride. I love that. Tell listeners, viewers, where they can find your work.
Yeah, it's at Nanduri, Nanduri NFL on Twitter. And then, the Decision Point Pod on anywhere you can find podcast content. You can go through playerprofiler.com or any of the Roto Underworld channels, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you consume your podcast content, it will be up there. And we don't have a set schedule, so it's kind of like a little prize whenever we decide to actually get together on the mics anymore. There used to be a schedule. It's gotten a little chaotic, so you'll see it on there when you see it on there, I guess, whenever we tweet about it.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode, Anand. It was an absolute pleasure to have you, and I cannot wait to see you in Canton, Ohio this August.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.